This is one of the most hauntingly beautiful jazz standards of all time.
Life is lonely again. And only last year everything seemed so sure.
The lyrics tell the story of a man who was dismissed by the world, cast aside, and retreated to the comfort of his bottle. He spent his life pursuing the promise of happiness through romance, but he never ended up finding it. There was always an excuse, always something in the way, and his dreams were trampled on by society until he eventually died in the company of the other sad and lonely people. The song is called Lush Life, and it's written by Billy Strayhorn. It's a true story about his own life living as an openly gay African American man in the early 1920s and 30s when it really wasn't acceptable in society to be either. This recording of Billy singing his own song, Lush Life, just a few years before he passed away, is one of the most meaningful recordings that I have in my collection. It's not the best performance of this song that you can find, far from it actually, but it comes from the man himself. You can hear the weight of his own story coming through in his voice as he sings it. And even though this song didn't publicly debut until much later in his life, Billy originally wrote this song when he was 16 years old. Even though he was only 16 when he wrote it, the song kind of prophesies the life that he was about to live. The song's harmony is haunting, but yet the melody is so simple. It's really hard for me to comprehend what kind of experiences a child would have to so brilliantly put together this song. He spent most of his life out of the spotlight as a songwriter for Duke Ellington. He wrote some of Duke Ellington's most famous charts, like Take the A Train. The situations he was put in are hard for me to relate to, and it's so sad to me that this song even has to exist. That the only way that he could get the feelings that he had inside of him out was to write this relatively tragic piece of music. Beautiful piece of music, but tragic. Given the lyrical content of the song, you might expect it to be written in a minor key, but actually the song is in D-flat major. And it kind of establishes itself here with this kind of swaying of a D-flat major chord to a C-flat dominant chord. As he establishes us here in the key of D-flat, and we're kind of swaying between these two chords, he's telling us about all the happy places that he was visiting, all the come what may places. And then with a flurry of energy, he walks us up the major scale to the 5 chord, but when we land on it, it's a minor 5. And you're thrown off thinking, maybe this isn't such a happy song after all. And as he comes back to the swaying feeling between two chords, he changes it. Instead of D-flat major to C-flat 7, he's now doing D-flat major to D dominant 7, a half step apart. And it's kind of unsettling. So just in the first 7 or 8 bars, he's already set up the mood for this song. He's established us in a major key, but he's contrasting it with the promise of the happiness that he's pursuing with the more difficult reality that he's living. So after this intro, we modulate up a major third into the next section, and he establishes us firmly in the key of F minor. So as he explores the harmony of F minor for a little while, and we reach the climax of this section, he sets us up to go back down to D flat major, and he does that with a 2-5, an E flat minor 7 to A7. But he fakes us out. Instead of resolving this peacefully back into D flat, he plays a very spicy B dominant 7 with a flat 5. And this chord is a really interesting choice. The flat 5 on the B dominant 7 is F. So in a sense, the melody has been resolving its way back down to F because we were in F minor. It's the strongest note in the key of F minor. It's so dissonant, it just has to resolve. And so where do we resolve it? We resolve it the way that we resolve so many spicy chords, down a half step to B flat dominant 7th. That B flat dominant chord will take us down a 5th to E flat minor, but then he does it again. We still don't go to D flat. Instead, this time he went to A7 with a flat 5. And so to get us out of the situation, he does ultimately give us another 2-5-1 back to D flat. But he pulls us there through this 4-3 suspension where the melody is holding an A flat over that E flat minor chord and resolves it into the A flat 7 and then holds it still into the D flat major. And it's just so satisfying to finally be back. And now back in D flat, we're kind of entering the main section of the tune, the main melody of the song. It's the meat of the story. And we continue the swaying that we set up earlier, the D flat major 7 against the D dominant 7. The melody is beautiful, but in this kind of subtly tormenting way. It's not settled at all, kind of moving around chromatically. And on top of that, the note choices he's using over these harmonies are so colorful. Major 7s, 9s, 13s, and flat 13s. And just as we start to get comfortable here in this kind of unsettling place, all of a sudden the mood shifts. He's singing about a week in Paris, kind of refreshing and calm and happy again. He's briefly left aside all the difficulties he had back home. The harmony underneath this just kind of amplifies the feeling of happiness and joy that he's feeling on this vacation. They're much more resolved, much more joyful. And as with all vacations, they eventually come to an end. And he can't get the tortured thoughts out of his head of his failed pursuits at romance. And he starts to come back to reality and continues to spiral down into his depression. Ultimately, at the end of the song, he accepts his fate and he sings this gut-wrenching lyric.
And there I'll be while I rot with the rest of those whose lives are lonely too.
The melody in this final line climbs up chromatically, while the harmonic structure beneath it climbs down chromatically. They move in opposite directions. This song was never a huge mega hit, but anybody who studied jazz seriously knows the profundity of it. And because of that, many artists have struggled or refused to even perform it. Frank Sinatra remarked that he tried to record this several times and failed. He said he always needed another year to get it right. And it's not just the harmony and melody. That's tough enough. But it's the weight of the message, the emotional impact that the story has, and the immense responsibility that you have to carry that and perform it well, that was just too intimidating for these guys to carry. All that said, there have been many people who have rose to the occasion. John Coltrane, Cole Porter, even more modern players like B.G. Adair. And this might be a little bit controversial, but besides Billy Strayhorn's recording of himself singing it, my favorite recording, I think, is from Queen Latifah. Whether you like Queen Latifah or not, and trust me, I get it, she's not the first person we think of when we're looking for jazz singers. She did a recording of this for the soundtrack of a movie called Livin' Out Loud, and it's just incredible. Before you pull Lush Life out of the real book and give it a go for yourself, I've put another video together here for you that I think you'll like.